Hey everyone, welcome to February. I'm joined by some familiar faces, Amanda Burtch and Megan Bryant, and I'm Patrick Bryant. We're going to talk to you about a really important topic, something that is special to all of us. It comes up in conversation just organically. It comes up in all of our respective work with our clients, and that's about nurturing. There's something really significant about nurturing as we reach the end of winter, beginning that first little glimpse of spring. So I'd love to just open it up and have each of you maybe chime in on what is nurture? What does that mean to you when you think about
I'll jump in. I think this is a tricky topic because it can look at like so many different things, especially the way that the like modern world pictures it for us. But for me personally, nurture really looks like recognizing kind of how I'm feeling, checking in with myself, having a dialogue with my body or my brain or whatever other internal systems to see what I'm experiencing. So to check in and to see if I'm feeling overwhelmed or overworked. Do I need a break? Do I need to a little bit more self-discipline? So it's really just kind of like checking in with my needs and um, letting that be the louder voice than like what I need to do. So like looking at my to-do list or my project list and like being really over on the like productivity end versus being like, okay, what do I actually need to feel regulated, to feel grounded, to feel energized, to feel rested?
it? Mm-hmm.
I love that, Amanda. That comes to my mind too. And I think sometimes the nurturing, I also think of like tending to. So, like, how do we kind of tend to ourselves? Like you were saying, that check in, prioritizing. And then I think self care naturally comes with that. How do we kind of care for that nurture place where it's not so much the producing or the productivity of things or like have to do, it's the kind of that preparation. Think of it being a little bit softer and quieter. Um, yeah, that's what I kind of naturally think of.
That's interesting hearing you two just noting the biological gender difference here because for me what I hear is that it's not something that comes naturally to me. It's not on my radar. It's something I have to pay deliberate attention to and like very intentionally put it on my agenda. I do a lot of work with men's health, and that's something that is across the board. A lot of guys ultimately struggle with it. A lot of us want it. Every Most people that I encounter want it. We have a lot of information about how to do it. It's the actual prioritizing, the nurturing that gets in the way for us, which is, not to repeat the same things that you two have said. I think that's a really good uh, definition of what nurturing is. It's I like to say including ourselves as a priority. People
Mm.
sometimes think that means it's being selfish, but it's not. It's just including ourselves as a priority, tapping into, hey, what do I actually need or want? And what if
Mm.
I prioritize that right now? Maybe I ask for help. Maybe I invite other people in. But yeah, I think it's definitely a conscious effort.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
curious.
I'm wondering, like, does that then tie into self-compassion? Like, if, right, you're intentionally making space for that, intentionally prioritizing, it's also self-care, right? But then it's also showing yourself compassion.
Well, it all overlaps in that Venn diagram.
Mm.
Hmm. So what might be like specifically for men's health, why might it be more difficult to offer yourself more compassion or to kind of bring in this aspect of nurturing for yourself? Um, Maybe does it show up for other people too, like the way that you show up for other people?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think speaking for myself and just, the guys that I work with, and then, there's some literature out there. The American Psychological Association has published ways to work with men. You can take it or leave it, but it's based on lots of studies of what's getting in the way of guys taking care of themselves, right? So a lot of that has to do with our conditioning around vulnerability. Um, but I want to be really careful there because there's a lot of stigma around that that has a lot of sharp elements. We like to be quite honest, we like to really ridicule and criticize men about that. Let's look at the history of how we got here, right? So that's the bigger picture of what gets in the way is historically speaking, systems were structured in a way that men just had to get shit done. We just had to go, we were drafted into battles. We had to go take care of larger things. And there was a balance or a harmony. There was no one person in the system is more important than the other. That's just what the men's role was in history. And so we've evolved out of that. We've made life a little easier in a lot of ways, but we still get caught up in those old webs of I don't have time for that. I don't need that. That's not a priority. I got to take care of others, which I assume is a perspective that women share too. But I think for men, that's kind of conflated in with a I feel weak if I need to take if I need to be taken care of, if I need to nurture, I need to go, I need to be productive, I need to get things done. What we need to focus on is how do we get things done. Maybe resting, nurturing, building that strong foundation is actually the most important thing first. So ultimately, vulnerability.
Yeah. I think it's interesting too, is like that such stigma around what this could look like for people. So like maybe for all genders, but specifically women, it's like face masks and manicures and like these are the things that are self-care and like taking care of ourselves, which isn't necessarily right for everybody. Maybe that's your one thing that you do a month that's like your treat, like a gift to yourself that's a great act of care. But Megan, I'm curious kind of like what does self-care actually look like for you in your life or in people that you work with?
Yeah, well, I do appreciate a good face mask, but not always realistic, right? I think, yeah, it just naturally in the work I do, a lot of self-care looks like engaging creativity. So how do we kind of intentionally give ourselves that time to rest and kind of nurture that creative space to help in kind of helping us slow down? And I think too, as you're saying that, man, I think, obviously there are gender differences, right? But I think too, if we just think of like, okay, brain and how do we help like brain, body, nervous system, like as a human, how do we create that rest and nurturing our things, right? Which is what the path is and what we're doing here of how do we move? How do we shift our thoughts? How do we, prioritize all these things that we're doing to nurture ourselves? And I think that is a lot of just kind of universal self-care. Maybe there's a different label for that, but of ways to nurture ourselves and yeah, what we know of science and research and just, I'm sure Patrick, you could speak on that. You don't have to, but like going back, evolutionary, like you were saying of that, of how just we need that time of rest, right? After you go hunting and, doing all the things, like you need that, like, okay, I'm safe. And how does your brain and body know you're safe? And how does it restore, as that being self-care, that restorative time to then be able to go out and do these things that we want to do. Now we're not going hunting for our food. Maybe sometimes we are, but that's not so much the goals and intentions we have. It's, I want to work out or I want to be healthy or I want to, do these things. Other intentions and resolutions and goals come up.
Yeah, and yes, and I wanted to say, as I'm hearing you all, it's a reaction to scarcity. That's so much of what I think we're dealing with is, if I skip this one workout, I'm gonna be miserable, or I'm gonna, all of it's gone, all my efforts are gone, or just so much scarcity mindset. Look around. Who else in the natural world other than humans is going full throttle in the wintertime? Nobody. There's no other life out there going hardcore. January 1st, it's a new year. I got to go all in. I mean, that's a calendar year, so it's a bit arbitrary anyway. If we look around, there's nurturing. More than human life works really hard to survive and thrive, and yet finds time to rest and to take care of themselves and really nurture. It's an interesting thing to consider.
Yeah, and I think like remembering that we have to nurture, right? Which winter and this season can help remind us that we need the stillness, right? It's not like everything's dead and barren out. It's making roots, right? It's growing. It's kind of grounding to be able to come for spring. And oftentimes we just want to go and do. But how do we prepare for the doing? I don't know if that's the right word, but nurture the the grounds to be able to do. Because if we just do, oftentimes we hit a wall or we burn out, right? I didn't do it how I thought I wanted to or had planned to, and so like I'm done. But yeah, how can we shift that mindset and or give ourselves the space, the grounding to, okay, how do I want to do this? What is it going to look like? Give ourselves a little time to prepare to then be able to do and hopefully be more successful in kind of how we achieve these things.
I think it's such a good point too. There was if you refer back to the mindful movement practice from January, I gave three different like energy states to kind of check in with yourself. And that same thing applies here is to figure out like, are you in survival mode? Then your care needs change, right? So
Mm,
being in survival mode, you might need a little bit more like planning ahead, such as meal prepping or, figuring out like getting some support from somebody else. If you're not in survival mode, then but you're still having a hard time kind of building this habit of nurturing or self-care or compassion, then how can you pace yourself in bringing in a new habit, such as waking up earlier, but not necessarily needing to fill that time with anything, or putting your phone to bed before you go to bed. So again, having that little bit of spaciousness between the external stimulus of the world and your bubble, like your nest that you're creating for yourself to rest for the evening. So I think that's kind of like a good point too, is like how do we bring in these habits and make them grow roots or have them grow roots and tend to that soil, versus like try to force them out of the hard, solid winter ground.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you know, here's the nature nerd. Like we aren't trees, but that's why trees release their leaves so they can focus all of their energy on preserving and protecting the root
Mhm.
system, if not growing it.
Yeah.
Um, so we can think use that as a metaphor for our own experience of how do we come in and really take care of ourselves, as you said, Megan, like, so we're ready when it
Mm.
comes time. And again, it's a somewhat arbitrary. It's not that we're ready in March or April to go, burst through the ceiling. It's whenever you're ready. It's taking time, and we don't have to wait until winter to nourish and nurture ourselves. It's if we move at a slower pace that we're mindful of. Amanda, you were just talking about it. I call it like meeting yourself where you are.
Mhm.
If we just do that, then we can nurture that, we can honor that, have the self compassion to
Yeah.
then take the first next step rather than I should be 10 leagues from here. Why can't I just get there and then beat myself up for it?
Yeah, Patrick, I like that note of the self-compassion that comes with nurturing and I think honoring your own timeline. It's not, okay, January 1st, now I have to start this. It's not, it's technically spring outside. I have to do this, right? Sometimes we put these pressures or society puts these things on, or we kind of have these ideas of I need to do this when. But I think what we're really trying to cultivate here is okay, let's listen to ourselves. What do I need? How do I intentionally take time and space to figure out kind of what I need and what that looks like so that I can do other things I want to do. But I think, yeah, kind of not getting stuck in that I have to kind of mentality or mindset.
Well, and
Mm-hmm.
also that like key about like meeting ourselves where we are is tending to our current self, right? So if we want to be this future version of ourselves and we're focused on that for future version of ourselves so much that we forget about who we are right now, that future self is never going to come to fruition. It's never going to grow. We have to be able to meet ourselves now and nurture, nourish, feed, fertilize whatever is here now so that we can grow those habits and patterns that are, healthy and the walk that takes us towards that future version of ourselves that we want to be, instead of doing that like all or nothing, or trying to kind of shift the mindset from like, well, I want to be this person, but I'm not that person now, so I can have these like negative self-talk that's going on, or I can have this like hard and fast rules and goals and maybe a little bit of perfectionism. So it's all about kind of like loosening our grip, just like you said about loosening the leaves. Like we got to kind of let some of that stuff go so we can really hone in on what's present now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So how do we prioritize it? How do we make this non-negotiable?
it's a good question. I think it's hard. It's a difficult practice because, again, we have all of these messages that are coming from the outside world, that are coming from our friends, our neighbors, our communities too, that are like, well, I'm doing this thing and I'm doing this thing and this is what's helping me and this is what's helping me. So it's like we're getting all of this noise instead of kind of going through the clutter that what's going on in our own selves. So what I like is just like a little bit of boredom time, like just no external stimulus. So that might be, turning off the phones, no music, no podcasts, no books, and just allowing myself to sit and contemplate. And when I contemplate, I kind of understand like what's coming to the surface, um, and what's the most like prominent thought, or the prominent thing that's coming up is like I really want to feel healthier, right? I really want to focus on my health. So what does that look like? Does that mean, do I need to eat different, cook different? Do I need to move different? Is there what needs to maybe churn in that time that allows me to feel healthier? What does healthy even feel like or look like to me? So it's just asking all of those questions and sitting in that contemplation of like, okay, well, I could drink more water in the morning. So maybe I'll set a rhythm in the morning where I drink, 3 glasses of water before I even have coffee, or whatever, the kind of loose guidelines I set for myself. But that can really start to build a priority, a habit. Like every morning, this is my routine. Now I'm just building this routine and it's simple. It's just drinking some water before I drink coffee. It
It's
doesn't take
the
long.
small habits, right? Those small ones. But sometimes we're like, oh, I want all these things. And we consume so much content and read so much and hear so much of like all the things that are good for us and all the things we want to do. And sometimes we think I need to be doing all these things. But I think synthesizing that, I saw that word right, it down to like, okay, like I'm going to drink water. Let me set the timer, like for the next week, I'm going to drink water before my coffee. And like, that's what I'm going to focus on this next week. Right. And then maybe the week after that, what else can I do? But it's not, I'm going to drink water, go to the gym. I'm going to make sure I do my yoga. I'm going to meal prep. Like when we put too much, we stretch our capacity too far. And that can easily lead to burnout or fatigue or just realistic not being able to do that all at once. And then we hit that wall of, oh, I didn't do it. Right? So now I'm done and forget it. I can't do it. And then that inner critic chimes up of like, see, told you, or kind of those negative self-talk we can have, which obviously is not being compassionate to ourselves. And so I think we kind of unintentionally, we have the best intentions, but we set ourselves up to just kind of get stuck or not realistically be able to do that. So I think that reminder of how to find a small habit to incorporate, and then kind of build from there. And I know, Mandy, you were sharing with me earlier about kind of that, like I think intentional rest of like, okay, if we want the TV on and doing something, kind of mindless or just watching something, and also instead of maybe going to the phone to kind of zone out even more, of how do we maybe do a creative practice of, like you mentioned, like paint by number, or the making practice in January that was a creativity workbook of just kind of like being creative and kind of taking time to rest in that. Like, how do we incorporate kind of some of those other meaningful moments of rest where it's not that we have to do something? Oftentimes we think, right, we have to do or we're not being productive. So how can we maybe focus or kind of shift that mindset of rest can be productive and that's important? And how do we shift to that to help nurture ourselves? All connected. I know Patrick said the Venn diagram, like how all those things fit together.
Yeah. Well, I think, there's neuroscience to support what we're talking about. I mean, We referenced it last month. Um, we know factually that we cannot do too many things at once. Multitasking, by definition, it's a fallacy. I think I've talked about, the piece of pie or cake or whatever it is that you prefer. The more pieces you cut into that, the smaller each piece gets. So think about that. If you start out the year and you're in February and you've got a month in of yoga, I'm going to train for a 5K, I'm going to change my diet completely, which means shopping differently, which means eating at different times maybe. If we're doing all of these things, we get fatigued and we're only devoting smaller and smaller amount of our effort toward each of them. So by getting it down into what's really important and integrating, that's why integration is part of the path. Is we're introducing one thing each Monday. It's really the same thing in a different context each Monday, and then we integrate it, and then we move on and build on that. Right? So, I think that's the reason we do that, is to promote. This is how we actually build things into our routine or rhythm, rather than I've got to completely change who I am or meet this goal or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I think it's that the harmony aspect of it is really bringing in a symbiotic relationship between your inner realm and your outer world, and allowing them to swim together and dance together in a way that supports your overall health and well-being, not just like one key factor of it. There's so many different doctors for different things, but when we can kind of take these little pieces, like working with our mental health, working with our physical health, working with our, like creative health, and like all of these things are part of a whole. So when we bring that all together, it is helpful to kind of let that shine forth as our non-negotiable. Like our inner realm is what we have, right? It's our existence, it's our experience of being human. And I think when we think of it that way and we prioritize it that way, making something like caring for yourself a non-negotiable is like should be pretty simple. It's not. But when we can kind of put that meaning behind it, that's what makes it, I think, a little bit more doable. It's like this is for me now and the longevity of my life and my human experience that who knows how much of that I get to have, right? Yeah.
I would add to that, and maybe like for me in my experience, I would critique it a little bit and say that it is simple. It's not easy, but it
Yes.
is simple, and that's actually the problem, is that we overcomplicate it.
Mm.
It's by adding so much and making it so busy and so beautiful and perfect. If we just make it simple, maybe it's a little sloppy at first, and that's okay.
It's a learning
Yeah, and I think it was
process.
yeah, I think it was last month we talked about like that self-care doesn't have to be a huge thing, right? It doesn't have to be I need to go to the salon and spend 3 hours, it doesn't have to be a big production. It can be those small moments, which I think we're really encouraging people to think about like, okay, where are those small moments of rest, small moments of self-care that may be small in time, but not small in value, right? And that can be incorporated throughout the day, throughout the week, kind of, yeah, throughout life, where it's not, I need to earn my self care. It's not like, okay, next Friday I can do this thing. But until then, forget it, right? It's okay, how do I take a few moments before bed to do something? Or how do I doodle while I watch TV, incorporating those, or drink my water before coffee, incorporating those times of nurture consistently. I don't know, just out of a plant, right? You don't let it, well, maybe some you do. I don't know my plants very well, right? You don't let it all dry out and then completely saturate it, or maybe some you do. But kind of that slowly, okay, I'm going to keep it moist, right? Kind of keep nurturing, keep watering throughout the time.
Well, no, if you let it completely dry out, the roots die. But if you
Okay,
saturate
okay.
it, the roots
Totally
die.
good.
So, like, yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, so Megan, I know you're gonna get into the Monday practice this month of bringing creativity into this process of nurturing. So, and I know that neurologically speaking, I mean, we're developing and strengthening that neural pathway into our prefrontal cortex, where executive functioning and problem solving lives, because otherwise we're operating from that old brain of just surviving, surviving, surviving. Well, so can you talk a little bit about, why activating that creative process is so important?
Yeah, yeah, it helps us get out of often we know now, right? Brain isn't totally left hemisphere, right hemisphere, like everything is integrated, but oftentimes our kind of go, 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 and where anxiety really lives is more the left side and kind of that doing, and we kind of get stuck there. And creativity is very much more right brained. And so helping to activate those centers a little more can help slow down, can help shift out of that anxiety spiral that might be happening, and really give us space to just kind of see what comes up. To your point, Amanda, kind of giving us space of like, okay, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? Right. And maybe creativity thoughts can more naturally come up. Oftentimes, if we're trying to force something, it just isn't going to produce, right? If we're trying to make ourselves be creative or do something. And creativity isn't always just like art making, right? Or kind of like producing something. It can be creative problem solving, right? I have this stressor at work. How am I going to work through it? Some different things in that way. So allowing ourselves to not kind of get stuck more in that thinking part, more in that anxiety part, but that creative problem solving obviously has lots of benefits.
Well, we see that, there's multiple types of intelligence, and studies show that creative intelligence is actually far better and more effective at problem solving than intellectual approaches, academics. So we're using, like you said, different parts of the brain, but it does help clear that pathway up here where we get more problem solving, versus back here, the old brain, where we don't have time for being creative. We just need to get away from that bear that's trying to eat us. It's just not the life that we are actually living in for most of us. We recreate that out of a nervous system reaction, not based on what's really happening. All right. So are there any final thoughts? Anything that feels like, what we've talked about, or what we want to have people get excited about as we move in through the month?
Well, I do think that it's something to note that we can prioritize self-care and self-nurturing and self-compassion, as well as, doing these things for other people, taking care of our families and our friends and our neighbors. But it's also about taking care and nurturing our intentions. So if you started out the new year with like big resolutions, big goals, big resolution, or rather, intentions, see if you can kind of dwindle it down a little bit so that it is um maybe that you're picking out one or two that's like the most important to you, and discover how you can really fertilize that soil around those seeds. It doesn't need to be full fruition immediately. Let it take time to kind of grow roots and see where those roots are taking you. And so again, that self-care can also kind of be applied to the specific like seed that you've been planting this winter as we move towards spring.
Yeah, I like that. I'm excited about this month on the path and the practices because I think it does, slowing down and giving ourselves that nurture time doesn't necessarily come naturally. And so I think putting that on people's radar and like, okay, let's practice this. What does it look like? And here are some things to do, right? Um, and I'm curious, it'll be in the journaling part, in the journaling prompts for this month, but kind of like, what do you notice come up for yourself when you're slowing down, when you're just doing kind of like a little bit, does that critical voice pop in of like, you're not doing enough, or you need to do more. What about this? Like what comes up? And that is such useful information to like, okay, how does this show up in my life? Right. If I'm struggling to slow down to do this 2-minute movement practice because whatever thoughts are coming up or whatever judgments are coming, how does that show up in something else in my life? So I just think it's a really unique and special theme, I think, to like really give ourselves this time and space to reflect on that and nurture and kind of see, okay, how do I move forward incorporating some of these things throughout the year, right? It doesn't have to be just now, but we're giving just now to practice it for this month.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pacing ourselves.
Mm.
All right. Well, hope you enjoy engaging on all the practices and that you find them helpful and easier. Well, maybe not easy, but a simple way to integrate them so that they are actually impactful. And we'll see you next time.